to me.
Information, news, and entertainment on demand.
WSRadio.com.
Welcome to OCC Balance, the weight loss show, with Dr. Ariel Ortiz.
Well, welcome again, listeners. This is the podcast where you're going to learn a lot about nutrition, weight loss, wellness. But I want to challenge the listeners today with a topic we are discussing about. And let me tell you, when we discuss topics, we have the scientific basis to either refute or reaffirm, and sometimes to question the science behind the topic. In this case, we are going to stump the listeners with eating saturated fat. I am going to challenge you for a minute. Listen to us for this next number of minutes in this podcast, because I want you to carefully analyze what we're going to say, and then try to remove that automatic way of thinking we have been programmed since the 1960s. What am I talking about? I'm talking about saturated fat and heart diseases. Everybody knows around the world that if you eat saturated fat, you're gonna die of a heart attack. Everybody knows, right? Right? Everybody's nodding their head. I can see you. So this idea comes from the 1960s, 1970s, specifically from a physiologist, Ansel Keys. He did some studies. He did some starvation studies. Then he created the K rations for the military. And this physiologist came up with the idea that if you eat saturated fat, you're going to have heart disease. Now, how did he come up with this idea? Remember, 1960s, is when he did these studies. And he did a study on countries. How many countries? 7 countries. And he looked at the information on these countries. And all these folks in the different countries were eating saturated fat, and they were getting heart disease. So he published it, and he said, there you go. You eat saturated fat, you're going to have heart problems. Now, there's only one issue with his research. It was flawed. It was terribly flawed. In fact, we now know that he kind of doctored the information so it would agree with his preconceived notion that, if you eat saturated fat, your heart's going to clog up and you're going to have a heart attack. There was information on over 20 countries, but they didn't align with this theory, so he removed them from the equation, and he had this beautiful presentation on 7 countries. This study supposedly proved that the theory of saturated fat would cause heart disease, but in fact it's been misinformation since the 1960s, and everybody fell prey to this. So eating saturated fat actually causes good heart health. Eating coconut oil, what else? Eating animal fat. And let me bring in our expert. We have Lucia Chavez, who's our chief nutritionist here at Obesity Control Center in Baja, Mexico. We are a weight loss surgery center, the premier destination. Let me plug that in. And I want to thank Lucia Chavez for being here. Lucia?
It is my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right, so let's discuss a little bit about fat. Now, we only have several minutes, but it's enough to get our listeners involved. Folks, listen in, because I'm going to ask my nutritionist a question. Lucia, if I eat 4 or 5 eggs a day, fry them in butter, and have my nice dose of leafy greens and vegetables, and then I have a little bit of pork lard, organic, but pork lard in the evening, maybe, let's say a pancetta. which for you guys that speak Italian, that's the Italian bacon, or maybe a pork belly, nicely fried in its own pork fat, and with some other vegetables, and the list goes on. Maybe some fish fried in butter and then bathed in olive oil. Am I going to die of a heart attack?
No, you are not.
So, is this a bad diet?
No, it is not. Now, as you said so, you need to include a nice dose of vegetables, and hopefully you're including also avocado, because everything tastes better with avocado.
Of course. Of course. So where am I going with this? Look, I've been on a diet half of my life because, like most of us, I struggle with excess weight. And for the first time in my life, I have been on a eating regimen, on a program, on a diet, if you want to call it that. It's a 4-letter word that everybody hates. But this is the first diet that I love. I wake up in the morning, fry a couple of eggs in butter, 3 strips of bacon, maybe some asparagus spears, and have my bulletproof coffee in the morning, and I'm ready to rock and roll. And you know what? Sometimes I'm not hungry until night. I might skip a meal. I might skip 2 meals.
And that's exactly what I was going to ask you, because for taste, it's understandable that you prefer this type of diet. But what about hunger, which is the biggest struggle for people who are on a diet?
Yeah. So where we're going with this is that eating fat makes you less hungry. You don't have these terrible blood sugar crashes, and thus you're not hungry, so you can actually skip meals. And in fact, it's now well studied that skipping meals, or in other words, intermittent fasting, is actually good for you. So eating fat is good for you, and intermittent fasting is good for you. And in one of the past episodes, we were talking about the keto diet, and how does what I'm saying fit into the keto diet?
As to food?
Yeah, food. From a food standpoint, if I were to get myself on a keto diet, which is high fat, low carb, and same protein, what would a typical meal look for me like? Or maybe you, I mean, because you eat keto.
I eat. I actually eat.
Yeah, you look great.
People don't think that we eat.
By the way, listeners, if you want to see the actual video footage of the show, you can see us on OCCbalance.com, and you'll see the actual video footage of this interview. So you can see that Lucia really is nice and thin and beautiful.
Oh, thank you. But I do eat, and I love eating, and I love food, and I do struggle with my weight too. That's common to all of us, especially living in this era. Everything that is around us is meant to make us obese. So it's not our fault. It's just, the times we're living. But what about the plate? Your plate should have a lot of vegetables. You do need to fill yourself up with vegetables, but also you do need to include some of the healthy oils and some of the healthy proteins. Now, what about the healthy proteins? I'm talking about happy animal sources and organic vegetable sources.
Let me break this down. So you said we've got fat, we've got protein, and we've got carbs. Now, when you mentioned carbs, you mentioned leafy greens and green vegetables, or vegetables that grow above ground. Now, pay close attention, because these are carbs that come from leafy greens and vegetables, but these are carbs that are mixed in together with vegetable fiber. There's something very unique about this. This is why when somebody's on a diet, they have to be on leafy greens and vegetables, because that fiber gives you intestinal health, and intestinal health in turn gives you immune response and a lot of other things that science has been recently discovering. So it's extremely important that your carbs come from vegetables. Let's talk about carbs for the next minute or so before
Other types that we could include, of course, that would be fruits. because we do need the antioxidants, the vitamins, and the fiber that comes from fruits. But those have to be limited. And if you have 2 in a day, and if you spread them through the day, never taken together or juice them, then you're doing good. You're doing fine.
So basically, come on, guys. Juicing and drinking your calories is a no-no. I've always said that if it comes from an animal, grows on a tree, or grows on the ground, it's good for you, especially if it's organic. Number 2, don't drink your calories, ever. Drink water. And if you're going to drink your calories, drink wine. And preferably invite your physician and your nutritionist. So the takeaway here is that on a keto diet, there's 3 components. You've got the carbs, you've got the fat, and you have the protein. Today we were talking about carbs, and it's as simple as Lucia was saying. Eat leafy greens, eat vegetables, eat as much as you want to. Why? Because the fiber is going to pull that carb all the way down to the toilet, and it's really not going to spike your sugar. Now, again, we will be talking in future episodes about the other 2 components of the keto diet. I want to thank Lucia for coming in and helping us out with a scientific basis on the keto diet. And to see more, you can go to occbalance.com, where you will see Lucia's OCC keto diet that you can follow. Again, I want to thank you, and I want to thank the listeners. This is OCC Balance on WS Radio, and I am your host, Dr. Ariel Ortiz. We are broadcasting directly from Obesity Control Center, an international center of excellence. This is Dr. Ortiz, signing off.